Welcome back to the afternoon portion of our meeting. Brother Rusty Springer will start our afternoon with his topic of humanism. Brother Rusty, his wife Lori, and their children, Isaac, Isaiah, Noah, and Chloe, have recently moved from Farmington, New Mexico to Burleson, Texas, where the family attends the Burleson Commons Church of Christ. His parents are Brother Tony and Sister Wilma Springer from the Sooner East congregation in Midwest City, Oklahoma, where Rusty was raised. He has been in full-time church work for the past 10 years. At this time, I turn the services over to Brother Rusty.
First of all, I would like to thank the leadership of the congregation at Ardmore for so far having a wonderful program and for allowing me to participate in this meeting. It's definitely an honor and a privilege to just be here and to be able to share with these other guys the talks that have been given on world religions. I've been given the assignment of secular humanism. Whenever Merle called me and asked me to participate in the meeting, do we have the lapel mic on? I don't like being behind here. When Merle called me about participating in the meeting, he told me the list of all the things that were going to be talked about, and I remember thinking, anything but humanism. And he said, we would like for you to cover humanism. I said, okay, I can do that. Then as time went on, I hadn't seen the schedule yet, and I thought, okay, any time but after lunch. And of course, he gives me Marlin's spot. So hopefully you will be interested in the subject enough. We can know humanism. You already know humanism. And we're going to discuss some different things about humanism. That number one, humanism is a religion. Number two, that there are dangers to humanism. We're going to learn how to win the battle against humanism. And we're going to see a journey of a humanist in the Bible. This is an important subject, and I hope that by the end of this study you will know that, and you will know how to win the battle. I want for you to think about for a moment the idea of secular humanism as it pertains to a story that we're all familiar with. Clint brought up a fairy tale, and so I thought I'd bring one up. And that's the story of Little Red Riding Hood. You know, her mom told her to go straight to Grandma's house. And as she's on her journey, the wolf comes out and meets her, and he wants something from her. And she says, you can't have it, but she tells him where she's going. And before she ever gets to Grandmother's house, the wolf takes a shortcut over to Grandma's. And he puts on Grandma's clothes, and he puts on her perfume, and he makes himself look like Grandma the best he can. We need to think about humanism much like this story. There's a lot of things that we can identify with Little Red Riding Hood. First of all, we see that humanism is a religion. You know, behind all of Grandma's clothes was a wolf. He did everything that he could. And there were some things about this wolf that identified him that he was not Grandmother. There are some things about humanism that sound good on the outset. And if we can identify what they are, we can see that that is not true. That is not the case. We need to know that, first of all, humanism is a religion. And behind Grandma's clothes are the big ears and the big eyes to clearly identify this religion. First of all, let's notice what Paul Kurtz has to say. You'll see a lot of reading from Paul Kurtz, and I'm not going to read every one of these slides. But Paul Kurtz is the co-writer of the Humanist Manifesto 2 and the year 2000. And in order to maintain their tax-free status as a religion normally would, he said that the American Humanist Association performs religious duties and acts as a religion. This in and of itself is not to say that they are a religion. Paul Kurtz would stand up and tell you they are not a religion. They attempt to disassociate themselves with the religion altogether. But here we do see that he recognizes that they perform religious duties. We also see Here, that a humanist was denied public office in Maryland after he declined to pronounce faith in God. The appellate court ruled it unconstitutional that they couldn't keep him from public office because he had the freedom of choice whether he would believe or whether he wouldn't. And Justice Black stated later in his dictum, which is a formal opinion in this court, said that secular humanism is among the religions in this country. So we have that they performed religious duties, and we also have the fact that our own country recognizes them as a religion. But that doesn't necessarily make them a religion. What is it that's going to set them apart? What is the big eyes and the big ears that's going to tell us exactly what they are and what they're all about? First of all, in order to be a religion, you need a gospel. You need some sort of good news, and they have a gospel. Their good news, the gospel of the humanist, is to promote happiness by means of hedonism. Hedonism is the doctrine that pleasure or happiness is the sole or chief good in life. So whatever makes you feel good, whatever makes you happy, your own desires, your own passions, whatever that may be, feel free to do that if it makes you happy. That's the idea. That's the gospel of humanism. According to the humanists, they do not believe in an afterlife. So they believe that happiness is to be achieved in the here and now. And you have heard sayings like this. You have heard this kind of gospel preached. You have heard people say, live in the moment. You have heard people say, carpe diem, or seize the day. You have heard on commercials, just do it. This is humanism and the gospel of humanism. And we need to realize and recognize what it is. In order to be a religion, you must also have a doctrine. So what is the doctrine of humanism? The tenets of this doctrine are free inquiry, naturalism, non-theism, humanistic ethics, democracy, and globalism. And we'll examine each one of these for what they are. First of all, let's look at free inquiry. Free inquiry is a sharing of ideas, is how they put it, but it requires inquiry or questions to determine what is truth based on science or what they believe to be science. And it's based on the scientific method that Clint talked about, that they form a hypothesis or an educated guess. And in order to predict the outcome, which is what's talked about here, they form this theory after this. They predict certain things. For example, scientists once used several catalysts and chemicals to produce a natural effect. What they did was they took all these things and they produced an amino acid. And based on the building of that amino acid, they predicted that since that is the building block of protein, that you could build protein naturally. And that naturally, based on that protein, that it would produce DNA, which is the basic building blocks of DNA. DNA, of course, is the building blocks of a human organ or an organism. So through all of this process of just creating through natural means, and I keep doing that because it wasn't natural, they had these different chemicals and they had the different catalysts that they put to it, but they tell you then that they were able to predict that through non-living matter you could have a living being. That's their kind of science. Their science is really what they call naturalism. Naturalism is a synonym for evolution. Remember that, or keep in mind that science to a humanist is to predict the outcome. So they, from a tested hypothesis, and that theories are as scientific as proven law. So it doesn't matter whether they've proven the law, whether they developed this theory based on what they are able to predict. That's what's scientific. It's the why of what Clint talked about this morning. I was asked, what's the difference in humanism and atheism? And I said, well, atheism is somewhat a part of humanism. And I said, really what they believe is non-theism. The difference in atheism and non-theism, atheists deny the existence of God, that they say that they have a lack of belief. But the humanists believe that there is no God, but that is only a part of their overall agenda and what they are about. And that overall agenda is to replace your religion with humanism. That's their idea. That's their goal. For example, The humanist teaches to replace normal religious prayer with the practice of silent meditation, just as Chase talked about this morning. I like this quote that it says, saying thanks, and I don't know who in the world they'd say thanks to. But also notice that they also offer to replace religious congregational singing with family and concert sing-alongs. See, what they're doing here is they're not trying to say there is no God and that being the final. That's just what they're against. They want you to replace Christianity with humanism. That's their goal. And so non-theism is just a part of that in their overall agenda. That's why they're non-theists. Then we come to humanistic ethics. The humanist believes that I am my own standard and you are your own standard. That you choose what is right or wrong for you, and I choose what is right or wrong for me. And there's no real difference except that what I might believe in. And we might agree to disagree. Which brings us to democracy. You know, we are blessed to live in a country of freedom. And the humanist believes in legal rights based on the system of humanistic ethics. And that's important. That democracy is only important to the humanist so long as it is based on their system of beliefs. But as we look at the tenets of humanism, let's be careful. We need to realize that for now we may only see grandma's clothes. We may not see the big eyes and big ears because of our patriotic tendencies. And we need to be careful about that. But we'll get into that a little more as we go along. And then we come to globalism, which is actually their preferred idea of government. And what the humanists would desire to do is to replace or disperse the idea of nationalism to form a worldwide government with a central worldwide government, and each nation would then be states, but to disassociate altogether with the idea of nationality. That's what their desire is with globalism. Paul Kurtz says the highest virtues lies in man's existing for himself, self-interest, self-respect, pride, some element of self-centeredness are essential components of morality, which in the last analysis focuses on happiness. It's all about self. Humanism is a religion. It's idolatry. It's all about I. It's all about me. It is idolatry, serving man and not serving God. But what does that mean to you and me? What's the danger in all that? Behind Grandma's clothes was a wolf, a deadly wolf that had big teeth. And these big teeth and this wolf was out to get Little Red Riding Hood. And humanism is out to take your soul. They want your soul. So let's look at the danger of humanism. Paul Kurtz says one direction we might take is to try to influence the opinion makers, authors, teachers, professionals, and scientists. The humanist church, which is the university, influences all sorts of professionals. So much emphasis today is placed on higher education and having that higher education to get the better job that they realize that they can reach many people this way. And their whole goal is to keep you from your faith. For example, my first math class that I ever took in college, they told me that 2 plus 2 is not always 4. They told me that 2 plus 2 in the base of 4 is 10. And 2 plus 2 in the base of 3 is 11. I think. I'm not a math person. But when I took my English classes, I'm an English person, we read a poem called Song of Myself. And it was all about the celebration of one coming to himself in self-actualization and reaching happiness through hedonism. That's what that poem was all about. We talked about in my history classes that Christopher Columbus may not quite be the hero that we might have thought him to be. All these things may be true. Justin tells me that that is correct about the basis. I don't know if I had the numbers exactly right, but 2 plus 2 is not always 4. Those may be true, but what we see here is the intent of the university. Their goal is to keep you away from your parents and everything that you had been taught before and to change your thinking. They want to destroy your faith so that you could have faith in humanism. Humanists want their evangelists, teachers, to use the classroom as a pulpit in every level from preschool all the way to the university. That's their desire. And thank God that there are some of you who are in this profession that are battling the effects of humanism, that you're keeping that from happening. But it's there, and you need to understand that. But we're not only attacked in the classroom, we're attacked by media. In the print media, they promote humanism by scare tactics. They arrogantly assume that humans have the capability of doing what only God can do. We also see in radio media, they use shock value and trying to make you learn all the different things to produce their agenda. Now, Howard Stern may not be a humanist. That's who picture this is. But it is the humanist that proclaims his right to be on the air. And it's left up to you whether you're going to listen to him or not. You hear oftentimes they'll say, if you don't like it, just don't listen to it. That's humanistic thinking. And they'll tell you that they detest censorship. Easy for me to say. They don't want him off the air. But this is not the only media they use. Humanism uses the movie media so that you will sympathize with their behavior through entertainment. The movie industry constantly promotes humanistic ideals such as homosexuality. And you can see that all over in the movie theaters. That's not the only tool that they have. They have the television. They promote their doctrine through TV and putting that into your living room. These quotes that I'm about to show are from one popular television talk show host. There are many paths to what you call God. This is one of my favorite quotes in chapter 1. Man created God in his own image. Eloquently put. Speaking of New York Times bestseller, A New Earth by Eckhart Tolle. Jesus came to show us Christ consciousness, to show us high consciousness, not necessarily to be your Savior. And the Soul series is designed to elevate value of experience both here and now. We've heard that before, haven't we? The here and now. Do you know who this was? Oprah Winfrey. Oprah is not a proclaimed humanist, but she certainly promotes humanistic ideals. And she has been the #1 talk show host for 21 seasons, viewed by 46 million viewers per week. The book, A New Earth, that she quoted, has remained on the New York Times bestseller list for paperback advice since she put it in her book club. Humanism is affected and all over the place. It has even affected the churches. It has affected Christendom. This church in Tacoma, Texas, advertises to attend the church of your choice. Whatever kind of church makes you happy, what's going to make you feel good, that's where you should go. And this kind of attitude and humanism has affected our Christianity, even has come across in the way we believe about sin and its consequences. This is from a USA Today article. Ron Sellers says we tend to view sin not as God views it, but how we view it. A popular television preacher, Joel Osteen, says, I never thought about using the word sinners, but I probably don't. Most people already know that what they're doing wrong. When I get them to church, I want to tell them that you can change. Michael Horton in the same article says people know what sin is. They just don't believe in it anymore. We mix up happiness and holiness, and God is no longer the reference point. Happiness. That's the humanistic gospel. And based on this kind of thinking, we begin to justify what we do and think that certain things are okay. We begin to say things like, I have the right to hurt them. They hurt me. I don't need to leave a note on this Beamer. If they can afford this car, they can certainly afford the damage. We say things like, my wife is out of town. It won't hurt to look at a few of these pictures. We say things like, I don't want everybody to think that I'm a religious nut, so I'll just have a few drinks. Humanistic ideology is that you ask the question, is it okay? These are the works of the flesh and are never okay. But if we look at Proverbs chapter 2, verses 6 through 9, says, For the Lord giveth wisdom, out of his mouth cometh knowledge and understanding. He layeth up sound wisdom for the righteous. He is a buckler to them that walk uprightly. He keepeth the paths of judgment and preserveth the way of his saints. Then shalt thou understand righteousness and judgment and equity, yea, every good path. Wisdom uses knowledge, understanding, and discretion to demand the very best in every application. That we don't ask the question, is it okay? We ask what is best and what does God want. That's wisdom. So how do we win the battle? How do we defeat secular humanism? One of the things that we see about Little Red Riding Hood is that when she finally realized that this is a wolf, she began to cry wolf. She called him for what he truly is. And we need to do the very same thing. 1 Timothy chapter 6 and verse 20 says, O Timothy, keep that which is committed to thy trust, avoiding profane and vain babblings and oppositions of science falsely so called. We need to call it what it is. It is not science. It is not scientific. It is not natural. It opposes what God is and everything that is that we believe. It's not science. It's time to cry wolf. It is very evident in the fact that their doctrine has changed. There is a Humanist Manifesto 2 and a Humanist Manifesto 2000. And I believe they're working on a Humanist Manifesto 3. Do you know why that is? They have to change it. Truth doesn't change. But they have to change their idea, and they state that in this change was needed, this update was needed because there were mistakes in the former, and there will be mistakes in the next, and there will be mistakes in the next one. You know why? It's man-made. It comes from man, and it will always be mistakes. But it's evident that it's not scientific based on what they truly know and understand. But that's not all. That's not the only way to defeat secular humanism. We also need to defend our God. In Jude, verse 3 says, Beloved, when I gave all diligence to write unto you of the common salvation, it was needful for me to write unto you and exhort you that ye should earnestly contend for the faith which was once delivered unto the saints. Here, Jude was talking to Christians, warning them about a group of people called the Gnostics. And the Gnostics believed that they had special knowledge. Today, humanists are modern-day Gnostics. And so it is incumbent upon each one of us that we defend our God and what we believe and earnestly contend for the faith. So first of all, let's look at what it means to defeat it by calling it what it is, science, falsely so called. The gospel of humanism says that happiness is both here and now. However, in the same book, Paul Kurtz says that you can have happiness and promotes happiness as his gospel. He says that life has no meaning. What is a life without meaning? It's vain and empty and worthless. Can you find happiness in emptiness? They don't even believe the gospel that they're trying to promote because they don't believe that they truly have a gospel message. What about their doctrine? They believe that you should have two opposing opinions and share those opposing opinions with one another. And through that inquiry, through that questioning, and through coming through all those questions that you'll find the answer. However, logic demands that truth must be a part of that inquiry. If you want to find the truth has to be in the inquiry in order to find it. You can't have false premises on two opposing ideas and come to the truth. For example, if someone comes up and says, I believe that 2 + 2 = 5. Well, that's not the truth, is it? And somebody else comes up and says, well, I believe that 2 + 2 = 9. They can discuss and they can come up with all different ideas about 2 + 2 = 5, 2 + 2 = 9. Neither one of them have the truth, and they will not come to the truth as long as they hold to those ideals. They can even agree to disagree, and they both walk away without the truth. Or they can agree to compromise that 2 + 2 = 7. That's still wrong. You see, logic demands that there be truth in that inquiry. If someone says 2 + 2 = 5 and someone else says no, 2 + 2 = 4, they can come to the truth because 2 + 2 does equal 4. So logic demands that truth must be a part of the inquiry. On naturalism, which is their idea of evolution, sometimes those who promote intelligent design, a creator, use the complexity of the eye to do so. And they talk about all these different parts that have one function, and that's to see. In order to refute this idea, there were several scientists that are referring to the eyes of 4 different kinds of mollusks. And each one of those kinds of mollusks differ in complexity from the most simplest to the most complex. And the one that's most complex is similar to the human eye. But there's a problem. There are 4 distinct groups of mollusks. There is no transition between one and the other to show that there is any evidence whatsoever of evolution. The fact of the matter is there are no transitional forms that are living, and there are none in the fossil records. This is science falsely so called. So what about non-theism? For the humanists to believe, and Clint covered this quite a bit, but for the humanists to believe that there is no God is to ignore true science and evidence. And they believe, they have a faith in supposed predictions. Remember earlier we talked about how scientists predicted that living organisms could be created by natural means, by creating an amino acid? As is talked about before, Louis Pasteur proved that this is false based on the idea and the law of biogenesis. You can come up with all these different conjectures and make all these different predictions, but the evidence is not there. And you want to talk about unintelligible and fallacious. The evidence shows otherwise, and they are faith-based. What about humanistic ethics? That I am my own standard and you are your own standard. Humanism is about happiness or quality of life. If a baby would hinder your quality of life, you may abort it. If your wife develops cancer and it has become difficult to care for her, then call the doctor and in the name of mercy killing, have her euthanized to get her out of your misery. Both euthanasia and abortion are humanistically ethical because it's based on what you believe is right and what I believe is right for me. It's survival of the fittest, no better than the animals. The humanist has as much difficulty regulating right and wrong as they do refereeing a prison rules basketball game. You can't do it. And what about democracy? To a humanist, democracy is the supposed preferred form of government so long as humanism is in the majority. And if they're not in the majority, they start proclaiming, I have individual rights. And they fall back on that. But really, they don't believe in democracy because they believe in globalism. This is their true preferred form of government. Globalism is a synonym for worldwide socialism. That's what they desire. Their idea for democracy contradicts what they believe about globalism. We can see the inconsistency in everything that they propose and everything that they teach. So how do we earnestly contend for the faith? Deuteronomy 6, verses 6 through 9. And these words which I command thee this day shall be in thine heart, and thou shalt teach them diligently unto thy children, and thou shalt talk of them when thou sittest in thine house, and when thou walkest by the way, and when thou liest down, and when thou risest up. And thou shalt bind them for a sign upon thine hand, and they shall be as frontlets between thine eyes, and thou shalt write them upon the posts of thy house and on thy gates. To earnestly contend for the faith does not demand that you pull your kids out of school, though you have the right to do so. But we need to put higher education in its proper place. It does not belong before God, and if we put that in our kids' minds, they will go to college and they will be taught humanistic principles, and they'll come to believe it. And we can't allow that. And how we defend it is we know what we need to know. We equip ourselves with the knowledge of God, and we equip our kids and everyone else. And because if they do end up going to college, they will face it. Equip them. Get them ready for it. The gospel of humanism is human happiness here and now, but they don't believe that life has meaning. The gospel of Christ, Luke chapter 4, verses 18 and 19 says, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he hath anointed me to preach the gospel to the poor. He hath sent me to heal the brokenhearted, to preach deliverance to the captives, and recovering of sight to the blind, to set at liberty them that are bruised, to preach the acceptable year of the Lord." What humanism can't do, Christ can. Christ changes lives. He gives you true, fulfilling happiness through his gospel. He gives you contentment. He heals the brokenhearted. Humanism does not offer that. Let's look at their doctrine, free inquiry. 1 Corinthians 1, verses 18 through 25. "For the preaching of the cross is to them that perish foolishness, but unto us which are saved it is the power of God. For it is written, I will destroy the wisdom of the wise, and will bring to nothing the understanding of the prudent. Where is the wise? Where is the scribe? Where is the disputer of this world? Hath not God made foolish the wisdom of this world? For after that, in the wisdom of God, the world by wisdom knew not God. It pleased God by the foolishness of preaching to save them that believe. For the Jews require a sign, and the Greeks seek after wisdom. But we preach Christ crucified. Unto the Jews a stumbling block, and unto the Greeks foolishness. But unto them which are called, both Jews and Greeks, Christ the power of God and the wisdom of God, because the foolishness of God is wiser than men, and the weakness of God is stronger than men." And all this free inquiry that they want to have, and this science falsely so-called, they want to abandon the idea of God, and it's foolish to them, and they will tell you so. They'll tell you that they believe in reason, and that you believe in faith, and you have faith, and for that reason you're a fool. But God is wiser than they are. The wisdom of God is much more powerful and stronger than men. What about naturalism? David said in Psalm 139 and verse 14, "I will praise thee, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Marvelous are thy works, and that my soul knoweth right well." You are not a descendant of an ape. You were wonderfully made by God. Evolution, there's no evidence. There is certainly evidence that God created each one of us. What about non-theism? Romans 1, verses 20 and 21. "For the invisible things of him from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse. Because that when they knew God, they glorified him not as God, neither were thankful, but became vain in their imaginations, and their foolish heart was darkened." They don't want to believe in God. And therefore, that needs to be a tenet in their doctrine and what they believe. But they have to ignore the evidence that is clearly seen that there is a God. What about humanistic ethics? Jeremiah 10 and verse 23 says, "O Lord, I know that the way of man is not in himself. It is not in man that walketh to direct his steps." We can't do it without God. We're no better than the animals if I'm my own standard and you are your own standard. And that's why he said it's not in man to do it. But if we follow God, God is capable of directing our steps. His word is a lamp unto our feet and a light unto our path. He can tell us where to go and how to handle certain things. What about democracy? John 14 and verse 6 said, "Jesus saith unto them, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man cometh unto the Father but by me." It's not a democracy. We don't take a vote on who's going to be our King of heaven. It's Jesus. He is the way. He is the truth. He is the life. And there are no others. And there are no other paths to God. And what about globalism? 1 Timothy 6, verse 15 and 16. Which in his times he shall show who is the blessed and only potentate, the King of kings and Lord of lords, who only hath immortality, dwelling in the light which no man can approach unto, whom no man hath seen nor can see, to whom be honor and power everlasting. Amen. There already is a worldwide government, and our King is in heaven. He's the king that rules his kingdom, and we are, as the church, are that kingdom. He's the only king. There's not going to be any other, or shouldn't be any other, worldwide government. Now let's turn our attention to Solomon, who took a journey. In Ecclesiastes chapter 1, verses 12 and 13, he begins his journey. He says, I, the preacher, was king over Israel and Jerusalem, and I gave my heart to seek and search out by wisdom concerning all things that are done under heaven. This sore travail hath God given to the sons of man to be exercised therewith. Here was a man that's been there. A man that had every opportunity by wisdom to search out anything he possibly could. He had peace in his nation. He had all kinds of money to do it. He had every possible thing given to him so that he could do this. And he said, I sought out those things that are done under heaven, on earth, from a human point of view. He took a humanistic journey. In Ecclesiastes 2 and verse 1, it says, I said in mine heart, go to now, I will prove thee with mirth, therefore enjoy pleasure. Hedonism. Ecclesiastes 2 and verse 3 says, I sought in mine heart to give myself unto wine, yet acquainting my heart with wisdom, and to lay hold on folly, till I might see what was that good for the sons of men, which they should do under the heaven all the days of their life. We read in verses 4 through 10, I made me great works, I builded me houses, I planted me vineyards, I made me gardens and orchards, and I planted trees in them of all kinds of fruits. I made me pools of water to water therewith, the wood that bringeth forth trees. I got my servants and maidens, and had servants born in my house. Also I had great possessions of great and small cattle above all that were in Jerusalem before me. I gathered me also silver and gold and the peculiar treasure of kings and the provinces. I gat me men singers and women singers and the delights of the sons of men as musical instruments, and that of all sorts. So I was great and increased more than all that were before me in Jerusalem. Also my wisdom remained with me. And whatsoever mine eyes desired, I kept not from them. I withheld not my heart from any joy. For my heart rejoiced in all my labor, and this was my portion of all my labor. He sought for joy, happiness, through hedonism. That's what he wanted. Anything under the sun that this world had to offer. With alcohol, nature, servants, possessions, money, singing, songs, entertainment. All those things, that's what he looked for. Paul Kurtz stated that there is no no meaning to life per se. What do you think Solomon's conclusion was? Ecclesiastes 2 and verse 11. Then I looked on all the works that my hands had wrought, and on all the labor that I had labored to do, and behold, all was vanity and vexation of spirit, and there was no profit under the sun. Solomon came to the same conclusion Paul Kurtz does. Life has no meaning per se on earth without God. It's vanity, it's empty, it's worthless, it's a waste of time. It's beating at the wind, vexation of spirit, and there's no profit under the sun. And after all this was said and done, he sought all the wisdom of God as well, and he came to the only conclusion we possibly can come to. In Ecclesiastes 12 and verse 13, it says, let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. May God bless you in your efforts to fulfill your duty. Thank you.